Hey everybody, welcome back. Mark Halpern here, all the Nexters from all across the globe convening together here in one happy place on a Thursday. Thank you for being here. I'm Mark Halpern, editor-in-chief of the interactive video platform Two Way, and your host here to everything. Next up, my exclusive reporting analysis, great conversations, the news stories that matter most of all. With us today, Ro Khanna, Democratic Congressman from California, someone who's pondering running for president and has been at the center of a lot of the most important hot issues, the Epstein files and Israel and all sorts of things. So Congressman Khanna will be back with us today here on our 50th episode, bit of an anniversary. And then a great panel of reporters to talk about elections coming up presently and soon. My two friends from the New York Post, who I'll be doing election night coverage with on Two Way, Ricky Schlott, columnist and reporter at the New York Post, and Lydia Moynihan, also of the Post, a columnist and reporter there. And then to talk about the incredible story of the Senate race in Maine, Alex Seitzwald will be here. He left national media to be the deputy editor of something called the Mid-Coast Villager up in Maine, and he's been covering the heck out of this Plattner story. And so he'll be here in just a moment. The three of them will be, and we'll talk politics. That'll be fun. But first, next up is my reported monologue. That'll be coming up right after this. Stay with us. Don't go away. Everything's coming next up. I want to tell you all about something called the Vapor Technology Association. It's an organization that was started about a decade ago to protect the rights of Americans who choose alternatives to smoking. And it's about the small businesses who have made a living using this technology. They support science-based policies and the rights of adults to make healthier choices. Did you know that many family-owned vape shops and manufacturers across the country are now under attack thanks to what are outdated Biden-era regulations that threaten to wipe out an entire industry? The Vapor Technology Association, also called VTA, says businesses are being destroyed and people are losing their jobs. But the VTA says President Trump now has a clear opportunity to change all this and to protect Americans' right to make their own choices, to defend small businesses, and restore a free and fair marketplace. So right now, head over to vaportechnology.org to learn more about the organization and why they are leading the charge to support American innovation in this area. And if their mission appeals to you, consider becoming a member when you're on the website. Again, that's vaportechnology.org, and tell them you heard about all this on Next Up. All right, so now my reported monologue, and I got to tell you, we've talked about these issues before, the question of the press's role and the Biden White House's role in the issues of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. And I really don't want this to be my beat. I'm not interested in this being a thing I talk about on a regular basis. But the story's back. And because I see people not talking about it in the right way, important for history, important for America, important for the Democratic Party, important for the integrity of my business, once again, we need to review where we are in this story and talk about it. And what's kind of put it front and center is a new report out earlier in the week by Republicans from the House Oversight Committee investigating Joe Biden and the question of, particularly they're focused on the use of the auto pen and whether that was legit or not. But underlying that, again, is this question of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. And people talk about it as a cover-up. It was not a cover-up. It was an attempted cover-up. But the Democrats and the media, my colleagues in the dominant media, they could no more cover up Joe Biden's cognitive decline than the Trump administration could cover up, say, whether Scott Bessent often wears glasses or whether Marco Rubio has really good hair. These are things that are in plain sight. We can all see these things, just as we could see Joe Biden's cognitive decline. But the Democrats in the Biden White House tried to stop the media from, and other Democrats, from talking about his cognitive decline. So it was an attempted cover-up, but it didn't work. And for some reason, it took that debate with Donald Trump for this to happen. But running up to the debate, the Democrats in the White House, again, we're reviewing the facts here to take us up to present day, they tried to keep people from talking about Biden's cognitive decline so he could stay as president, so he could run for election. And they used two basic methods, okay? One was threats. If a reporter talked about Biden's cognitive decline on television, wrote about it, they would threaten them. They would say, don't you dare do that. And the reporters all knew they were being threatened. And you will find almost no reporter who was honest enough to break the off the record that the White House imposed in these cases to say, I'm being threatened. They're saying that I can't report the truth. I can't report what we all see with our own eyes. And then the other method they used, of course, was just lies. Just lies to say, on a regular basis, they would say, Biden runs us ragged. He's so much better, so much stronger than us. It's a guy who's the peak of his game. And so these were the two methods they used, and the methods were used constantly to try to keep people from reporting the story. It's a really, really unfortunate thing. Okay, really unfortunate. And how did this work in practice? It worked in practice. They were able to minimize how much this stuff was out there and reported. Democrats outside the White House faced the same pressure. They faced the same pressure all the time through the same techniques, threats and lies. Okay. And there were few exceptions in the media. Alex Thompson was an exception. He wrote about these things in real time. I was an exception. I talked about these things all the time. And on the Democratic side, who was an exception? Dean Phillips, Democratic congressman from Minnesota, tried to get someone to run against Joe Biden, to say we need to run against him because he's not going to win re-election, because the country sees not just that he's old, but that he's suffered cognitive decline. And Dean Phillips was basically run out of the Democratic Party for being one of the few exceptions to do it. What did the media do? The media stayed silent about the threats, as I said, and they basically accepted the lies. They accepted when someone from Biden world would go on TV and say, oh, Biden's awesome. Biden's runs us ragged. He's totally sharp. He's on point. They would just say these were they just not only accepted them, they'd say, these are Republican hit jobs. These are deep fakes or cheap fakes. There's nothing to see here. I've said before, biggest media scandal in American history. Well before the debate, all this was so obvious. So you want to talk about original sin, the title of Jay Tapper's book with Alex Thompson. The original sin, they say in the book, was Biden's decision to run for election. No, the original sins were the things I just described. Biden aides lying and intimidating both the media and the press, and almost every Democrat outside the White House and almost every reporter accepting the threats and accepting the lies. Then after the debate, now, more conversation. After the election, more conversation. And now the public release of the testimony that the House committee has made public of many people who worked around Biden and who were part of the attempt to cover it up. But even now, even though they've been testifying under oath, those who didn't plead the Fifth Amendment, the lying continues, the lack of accountability continues, and the sinning, if you will, continues. They continue to try to recreate history. The Biden aides, some of them at least, continue to lie in public, even under oath. But now we have some shocking admissions, and we're gonna play some of those for you. These are not getting coverage, these shocking admissions, and they should be, for history, for accountability of both the Democrats and of the media. Other Democrats continue to do their best to avoid accountability, and they say, well, I didn't see Biden's acuity decline when I spent private time with him. People say, the Democrats say. Again, the press should not accept that answer. And the question shouldn't be, did you see it privately? The question should be, we all saw it. How could you not have done anything about it? It doesn't matter what they saw privately, okay? And the dominant media continues to pretend like none of this happened, in part because the media doesn't want to acknowledge its own capacity to be involved in trying to cover it up, to hurt Donald Trump. They don't want to acknowledge what a horrible job they did in letting themselves be intimidated. But they also don't want to hold Biden, Democrats, accountable. The whole thing is just so embarrassing to me. It's so embarrassing that we have all this media, we have all these outlets, and yet all of this is barely being covered. Okay, so we're going to review some of the statements that have been made, both before the committee and then in public. And it should shock your conscience that this kind of thing could happen. There's plenty to cover of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump does plenty of things that are wrong and immoral, and he lies and cover up. I'm not saying the Democrats are letting people with dirty hands, but this was the biggest story in the world not that long ago, 1 year, a little over a year ago. And now all these revelations are coming out, which had they come out at the time, I hope would have been treated as big stories. But people in the media are just pretending it's not happening. The Democrats continue to just try to turn their heads and hope nobody talks about it. It is embarrassing. It's all more of the same. So two senior people in the Biden administration who clearly observed the president's cognitive decline because they have eyes and ears are on book tours. And because they're on book tours, they're in very high profile ways being asked to account for what it is that they saw and what they didn't see and what they did about it. So here's first Kamala Harris, former vice president. She's basically taking the position in her book, we should have been pressed harder. It was wrong to not press the Bidens harder to decide whether he was up for the job. But doesn't want to acknowledge that she ever saw cognitive decline. And implicit in all this is they say, well, he wasn't up maybe for running for re-election, but he could still be president, as if running for re-election is a harder job than being president. Anyway, here's Kamala Harris being pressed by a very good reporter from Australian TV about what she saw. And watch, to this reporter's credit, when Kamala Harris offers up a diversionary word salad, the reporter comes right back at her. Here's S4, please.
Wasn't Joe Biden, then, to put it on him, wasn't his refusal to recognize his own frailties the reason that you faced a nearly impossible task?
I ran against Donald Trump for president, and Donald Trump ran on a platform that was in large part, I believe, misrepresenting his intentions to the American people. I do believe that there are a fair number of people that voted for Donald Trump who believed him when he told them that his first priority on day one is going to be to bring down prices. And he didn't. And you combine that misrepresentation of intention with also what was at play in terms of massive amounts of mis and disinformation.
Now, forgive me.
And a truncated calendar in terms of the clock.
I want to interrupt you because that is a world-class pivot, but it is not the question that I asked you, which is about Joe Biden's failure to recognize his own frailties and what that did to you. The question is about Joe Biden. Are you still reluctant to criticize the former president?
In what regard, please?
Well, just in terms of that question. So you went on.
What exactly would you like to ask? Be more specific, if you don't mind.
Was it Joe Biden's decision, his failure to recognize his own frailties in that position, that put you in the position that made it almost impossible to win that race?
He was not frail as president of the United States.
But he had frailties. We all saw the debate.
I do believe that Joe Biden had the capacity to be president of the United States, and I have never doubted that he had the capacity to be president of the United States. If you want to talk about whether he had the ability to endure what a race for president of the United States would require in that political environment in 2024, as I've said in the book, I had concerns.
I'm just wondering, is there a reason why you won't go to that prolonged frailty question? Now, we saw the debate, we saw the difficulty he had marshalling his thoughts.
I have answered that question. I do not believe
that I think it's just hard watching the debate to see how there could not be a problem long term with someone who can't marshal their thoughts. I'm not saying his acuity wasn't present.
I talked about that in the book. And I also mentioned the context in which that debate occurred. And you'll probably remember how I talked about that in terms of what his travel schedule had been, that what he had been enduring in terms of the timing of that debate. I talk about it extensively in the book. I'm not shying away from that. That's why I wrote it in the book, because I do know it's a question people had.
All right, so I give the reporter credit for a lot of that. But again, centering this conversation around the debate is just ahistorical. It's not serving the public interest because this was all visible before the debate. So she gets off the hook. And again, she says, I never had any doubt that he was up to the job. Again, and I've said this before, he had good days. There were days when he could do the job. I'll repeat, he was not as far gone as the Republicans claim, but he was not as with it as the Democrats claim. And to claim they never saw anything, it's not about what did Kamala Harris see in private. It's about watching C-SPAN. Now, Karine Jean-Pierre is on her book tour. It's not going as well as the Harris book tour. She's not selling as many books, and she's dealing with a lot of really tough interviews. She did one with the New Yorker that everybody's talking about, where she just over and over repeated nonsense. She went so far in the New Yorker interview to claim the subtitle of the book is about the Trump administration rather than the Biden administration. The whole thing is bonkers. But here's a typically evasive answer from her about what she saw about Joe Biden's cognitive decline, if anything. S3, please.
Did I see someone or engage with someone that was not all there, right? That was not paying attention or listening or engaging with me? I saw someone who was sharp, understood history, understood policy, and I would get called in, and I said this morning, I would get called into the Oval Office, and I'd be like, oh no, because I knew whatever he asked me, I had to be prepared for an answer.
I mean, again, did she have interactions with Joe Biden where he was okay? Sure. But did she watch him do all these things we watched in public before the debate? She did. So those are kind of par for the course. Those are reminiscent of what we saw during the campaign. Now, two people who testified before the House committee where they released their depositions under oath. One is this guy, Ian Sams. You probably saw him on MSNBC and other places 1,000 times. He was kind of the main spokesperson to fight back against the independent counsel investigation and as called on along with the press secretary, as much as anybody else on camera to say, nothing to see here, Joe Biden was fine. Okay. Now, when he gets before the committee, they start talking to him about, well, how much contact did you have with Joe Biden to be able to represent to the whole country on behalf of the government that Joe Biden was fine? Listen to this embarrassing exchange with Ian Sams before the House committee. S1, please.
How often would you say that you interacted with the president in person?
I interacted with him pretty infrequently.
So weekly, monthly, what are we talking about?
Very infrequent. I think I met with the president a handful of times during my tenure in the White House.
I want to introduce Exhibit 2 as it's being passed around. It's a tweet from Alex Thompson at Axios summarizing, he pulled a couple quotes of an interview you did on MSNBC. And one of the quotes says, when I deal with him, he is sharp, him being President Biden. And he is asking tough questions. Do you recall this?
I got to say, that doesn't look anything like the president that I know. When I deal with him, he's sharp. He's asking tough questions. That's the President Biden that so many of us experience every single day.
So this statement, the basis for this statement was your interactions somewhere between 1 and 5 times.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that's a bit misleading?
I think it was pretty direct and honest, and said that when I do deal with him, he's sharp, and he was asking incisive questions during my meetings with him.
But you dealt with him 5 times in 24 months. That's not exactly a large scope of knowledge on how he interacts with staff. You don't think it's missing some context?
I don't.
Do you think that statement suggests that you deal with him more than you did?
I don't think so. I mean, I spoke about my own interactions with him. That's the President Biden that we experience every day.
Okay. But to the best of your recollection, 4 meetings, 2 were in person.
2 that were, the 2 that I described to you that I, at the very onset in the Oval, one was a Zoom where he was at Camp David, and I was a participant in the meeting. The phone call, I think there was another meeting, or another engagement, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just trying to get an understanding of, so the immunity decision was virtual with him at Camp David. There was a phone call regarding Hunter Biden's testimony.
Yes. An
in-person meeting regarding Hunter Biden's testimony. And one other in-person meeting?
About Special Counsel Hur's testimony.
About Special Counsel. So 2 in-person meetings.
Sure, at least that, yes.
Okay.
Good reputation, nice guy, supposed to be a smart guy. To come out on television after the debate, to spin for the president, to tell people don't believe what you see, and to say this is the president we deal with every day, we see every day. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And it's getting next to no coverage. There's been next to no coverage in the mainstream media, the dominant media, about a guy who went on television as the main spokesperson to say Joe Biden is fine, nothing to see here. And now he says, met with him twice, 1 Zoom, 1 phone call. Okay. Now, that's a big story. Here's a bigger story. The guy who was White House chief of staff, Biden had 2 chiefs of staff, Ron Klain and then Jeff Zients. Jeff Zients testified also. And Jeff Zients never said anything in public about concerns about Joe Biden, allowed the administration to, and people like Ian Sams and Karine Jean-Pierre to go out and say nothing to see here. It's all fine. He can be the candidate. He can be president. What was Jeff Zients saying behind the scenes? Here's one of the few places to write this up. Alex Thompson in Axios wrote this up. Here's his characterization of what Jeff Zients said. I'll read it to you. Former Biden Chief of Staff Jeff Zients told the panel, this is the House committee, that he, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, and VA Secretary Dennis McDonough all expressed concern about Biden continuing his reelection campaign after the debate. Zients told lawmakers that within a few days of the debate, Biden was aware of my view that he thought it was prudent to consider getting out of the race. This is a huge story. Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, he couldn't find people closer to Joe Biden. And yet they expressed doubt. And that's a big deal to tell Joe Biden, the job you want, the job you've wanted your whole life, you shouldn't have it anymore. That's an unbelievable story. Here's Zients in his halting way. Here's Zients talking to the committee, explaining some of this, that they saw a change in their point of view. S4, please.
Who on the cabinet was expressing concerns about the president's ability to win re-election?
I recall Gina Raimondo. I recall, but this is for sort of a different reason. I'm very close to Dennis McDonough. So I'm certain I talked to Dennis. I don't remember Dennis having a firm view of it.
Did you notice a change with, did you notice any change with Mr. Sullivan regarding these conversations after the debate President Biden had with President Trump?
Well, let me articulate my own position first, which is I believed after the debate that it made most sense for the president to exit the race. My recollection, I don't want to speak for Mr. Sullivan, my recollection is he shared that view.
Did Secretary Blinken ever express concern to you about the president's re-election? Okay.
Yes. I don't know where Secretary Blinken netted out in his advice to the president, if he gave his advice to the president. But he definitely, as someone who had worked for years with the president, was concerned.
Strike that. Do you remember any other senator saying they believed that it was time for President Biden to drop out of the race? To you personally?
And that many senators were skeptical, and many believed he should get out. I think there was a level of concern to begin with in terms of age and could he overcome the perception of his age. And then I think there was a belief post-debate that that was not overcomable.
Is it fair to say that following the debate, you were concerned with his ability to win re-election following that debate performance?
That was 100% what was behind my recommendation.
All right. So again, massive story for history, massive story for the Democratic Party. Just to review, Ian Sams, White House spokesman, says the president they saw every day had no problems, and he barely saw the president, barely saw him. And then the White House chief of staff, a laundry list of senior people who had doubts to the point to saying Biden shouldn't be the nominee. That's an incredible story. And you would think this would be covered. There's a lot of news going on in the world. The New York Post is covering it. I'm covering it. But I want to say, we're up to the minute here, how much is this being covered by other places in the so-called dominant media? So for this, I'm going to need my phone by Unplugged, our partners here, to do a secure search here. UpPhone is a great product. It allows you to do searches for anything you need answered while knowing that your personal information, it's going to stay personal and private with no data mining, no hidden trackers. This is a great new product that frees you from giving away your privacy just because you want to do a search. So I'm going to do a search now. I'm going to search Jeff Zients and do a news search and just see. So here we go. Jeff Zients search. And now I look at news. Okay. So here we go. Here's a New York Post story that talks about it. Here is a story in the Washington Examiner that talks about it. Axios talks about it. Politico has a story, but listen to the lead of the Politico story. Politico says, House GOP concludes investigation into Biden's alleged mental decline. The House's GOP's much ballyhooed investigation into former President Joe Biden's alleged cognitive decline has largely ended with a thud. Largely ended with a thud. And now I look at the full search results. I don't see anything from the New York Times. I don't see anything from the Washington Post. I don't see anything from NBC or ABC or CBS. This is a massive story. It's a massive story, and they're not covering it. Okay. I did this search again with Secure Search using my UpPhone by Unplugged. I recommend this this phone to you. I've been using it. It frees you up. It frees up your mind to recognize that you're taking back your digital privacy. Go to unplug.com/Mark right now. Get 25% off your phone case with a purchase of this great new phone. And you can learn more about it and order your UpPhone today. Again, go to unplugged.com, buy your phone today. Unplug.com/Mark to get your discount, to get your on the phone case. Unplug.com/Mark. So what did we learn here? We learned that all the original things that we're doing, Democrats lying, Biden Democrats lying, other Democrats staying silent or trying to avoid the truth, and most of all, from my point of view, because it's my profession, people in the media continuing to ignore massive stories. The White House Chief of Staff, the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of State, the Commerce Secretary, and others all saw that there was a problem, that Joe Biden shouldn't be the nominee. They were worried about him losing the election. They should have been worried also about how he was going to continue on as president under the state he was in. This is one of the biggest stories of my career, and much of the dominant media is completely silent about it. It's an outrage, and it's inexplicable. They're compounding the original sin by hoping it all goes away. It will not. All right, send me an email. Let me know what you think about today's report. Next up, halpern@gmail.com. You can always find us on X, on Instagram, and TikTok, the full program, as well as clips at Next Up Halpern, and of course on YouTube or as a podcast on your leading podcast platforms. Go on YouTube to youtube.com/@nextuphalpern. Speaking of next up here, Congressman from California, Democrat Ro Khanna. He's next up. You ever notice those creepy ads that pop up on your phone and seem to know exactly where you've been, what you've bought, even the people you've been talking about? You've probably asked yourself, is this phone monitoring me? Well, the truth is, your smartphone is constantly collecting and leaking data without your knowledge and without your consent. Every day, it builds a detailed profile of your life, your location, your habits, your interests, even the people you communicate with. That information is then funneled into an invisible marketplace where it's tracked, analyzed, and sold to the highest bidders. It's not just annoying, it's invasive, and it's happening all the time. But the UpPhone by Unplugged is different. It's designed to protect your privacy from the ground up. No hidden trackers, no data mining, just a secure, streamlined smartphone experience that puts you back in control. Whether you're texting, browsing, or using any app, the UpPhone ensures your personal information stays personal. It's the phone for people who are done being watched. Are you ready to take back your digital privacy? You can. Visit unplugged.com/Mark and get $25 off a phone case with a purchase of a phone. Learn more and order your UpPhone today. That's unplugged.com/Mark, because your life should be yours, not theirs. All right, next up, joining me now, Democrat Congressman Ro Khanna of California. He's been here before, and we're honored to have him here on our 50th episode of Next Up. Congressman, welcome back.
Congratulations on the 50th milestone. Honored to be back on.
Thank you. You're involved in so many things. We could fill the whole time with just one, but let's start with the shutdown. What are you hearing from your constituents, regardless of their political affiliation, about how much the shutdown is affecting their daily lives?
No, they're angry, they're frustrated, and they're fearful. The biggest issue is the SNAP benefits that are going to discontinue the day after Halloween. I mean, 16 million kids are not going to get food, and that's affecting even people in my district. People think of Silicon Valley as this wealthy place, and it is for some, but there are a lot of families who are struggling. And I'm hearing all the time, both on the SNAP benefits, and then I'm hearing from people who aren't getting paid, who are working for the federal government.
What's the solution if the president called you and said, Congressman, I want to work this out? What's the right solution? We have one party saying it's got to just be a clean, continuing resolution to open the government. The other party saying we need to talk about healthcare and other issues. How would you solve it if the president empowered you to come to get whatever parties the table required?
Well, first I would say to the president, I said, Mr. President, why don't we at least get Josh Hawley's bill across the line in the Senate and the House. Josh Hawley is saying, let's at least extend SNAP benefits while we are negotiating on the broader issue. And I've said that I would vote for that. And I hope Speaker Johnson would reopen Congress so that we can vote on a bill to extend SNAP benefits. The other thing I would say is let's pay our troops and let's pay federal workers, the essential federal workers, while we're negotiating this. That's what I think would be responsible while we're doing everything. Now, just yesterday, I heard about a couple in West Virginia whose premiums, they're making about $85,000. Their premiums go up $48,000 if we don't extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And I'd say to the president, why do you want that on your watch? Just extend the tax credits, at least give us a vote on extending the tax credits.
When do you think it will end?
I actually think the pressure is really mounting. I mean, we are hearing from federal workers, unions, federal workers. I mean, they're concerned. They're not getting paid. Staff in Congress starting November 1st are not going to get paid. The people without SNAP benefits are really getting hurt. So I am hopeful over the next couple of weeks that there's going to be some resolution, because both the suffering out there and also the air traffic situation. I mean, I was talking to a senior person, a flight attendant, who said that it's actually not safe. It's getting to a point where certain things, everyday reports about possible issues with flight safety are not getting processed. So we all have a responsibility to end this.
I have found this year to be unlike any other I remember, with just the whipsaw of news. Stories are the biggest stories in the country, and then they disappear. You and Congressman Massey have been at the center of the Epstein matter, trying to get more disclosure from the executive branch. Well, Where does that stand? What's happened to the pressure? Have the people who want no more disclosure won by stalling it out and removing public interest in this?
I don't think so, but it remains to be seen. This has been their strategy. They shut down Congress a week early during the summer, and the story disappeared. And then it came roaring back when some of the survivors spoke at the Capitol. They've now not had Congress in session. We can debate whether not wanting to swear in Adelita Grijalva and have a vote on the Epstein files is one of those reasons. I think it is, and not simply because of the release of the Epstein files. They know that 50 to 60 Republicans would defect in voting for Massey and my bill. And that could be the first step of Trump becoming lame duck, just losing so many people in their party. And so they have pushed this out, and they've gotten it off the front pages in candor. But I believe when we get back, Adelita Grijalva will be sworn in, and this story is going to come back with the same intensity as it was before. So until we have that vote in the House of Representatives, I don't think this story goes away.
You come across as a very nice guy, and people like you. I know people like you. I know Republicans like you, Democrats like you. In the last couple of weeks, I have heard from a lot of people, some who know you, some who don't, who are very disappointed in you over statements you've made about the Middle East.
Yeah,
and it's been quite striking to me, the language they've used, because it's filled with a lot of intensity. So I'll start by asking you this: do you believe Israel committed genocide in Gaza?
I believe that what I've always said is that I would defer to the UN and the ICJ, and there was a UN report that said that Israel did commit genocide in how they defined it, and I believe we should then ultimately defer to the ICJ. But I'll tell you where in 30 seconds where my view is on this issue. I believe Israel has the right to exist securely as a Jewish democratic state. I call that liberal Zionism, in terms of not the greater Israel, not the occupied territories of the West Bank and Gaza, but Israel has a right, like so many other countries have, countries based on faith, 43 countries. Israel has that right as long as people in Israel are being treated equally. I believe there should be a Palestinian state that is demilitarized, that does not have Hamas, and that is in two states, and that works with the Arab nations to achieve that status. And that has been my view. and I very strongly disagreed with how Netanyahu has conducted the war.
I'm sure if I'm hearing from people, because I'm not like your agent, you must be hearing from people, including maybe some financial contributors, maybe some political supporters. Have you been struck by the intensity of how angry people are at you over this?
I have not been struck. It's a very emotional issue, and I have gotten criticized from both some of the people who have deep identification with Israel, and I've gotten criticized from the left when there was an article saying critic of Netanyahu says he still supports Zionism, as I define as Jewish self-determination. So it's not an issue that is easy. If it were, the conflict wouldn't be there. But I believe my policies are actually pretty reasonable. In fact, I gave what I would urge people to do if they have a question or problem of where I stand is to listen to my Council of Foreign Relations speech and conversation. It's an hour if you have the time. And what they will find, someone from the Bush administration says, I've got one issue with you, Ro. You're presenting this as a new vision, but you're really not offering much new. This was the same framework that George Bush had in terms of a Palestinian state, non-Hamas, demilitarized with Israel as a secure state. I do think my position is where the mainstream of the Democratic primary base is. Whether it's the mainstream of the country, it remains to be seen.
You support Mr. Mamdani, right? Running for mayor of New York City. Okay. He supports arresting Benjamin Netanyahu if the Israeli prime minister comes to the United States. Do you share that position?
I don't, nor do I, just because I don't think that gets us to peace. And I also think that that's not going to be Mamdani's focus. My sense is he's going to be focused on buses and lowering rent and groceries. And he's elected not to be Secretary of State, but to be the mayor of New York.
Yeah. Why do you think he takes positions on issues if he's not trying to be Secretary of State? What would you? Well, let me ask it this way: what would you tell him as the campaign's almost over? But as mayor, what would you tell him about whether he should continue to talk about these kinds of issues as mayor?
Well, I think, look, he has every right to speak about his moral conscience as a prominent voice and a citizen. But I would say that what's going to ultimately define the success of his mayor tenure is does he deliver on the fundamental promises of reducing rents, reducing food prices, and making New York more affordable? And that would be my focus. But I've been so struck by this debate in the Democratic Party. I may be the only person who has campaigned for Abigail Spanberger, was invited by her to campaign in Pennington Gap in Virginia, was invited by Mikey Sherrill to campaign in Westfield and Livingston. I'm doing a rally for Mamdani on Saturday in Queens, and have campaigned on No 150. And this idea that the Democratic Party can just pick one of these wings is, in my view, not thoughtful. We lost young voters. We lost rural voters. We lost suburban voters. And guess what? If we want to build a majority party, we've got to bring them all back. And I think we've got to be a big tent party that recognizes that different people are bringing different strengths to the coalition.
All right, I ask you to do something that's often difficult for anybody, to speak about yourself in this sense. Why are you someone who more moderate members of the party, like Spanberger and Cheryl, want to have, but also some of the most progressive members? What is it about you? Is it your positions? Is it your bio? What makes you in demand across the spectrum for these candidates?
I don't know. In demand may be too much, but at least they
invited you
to have me.
Yeah.
So I think, look, I think it's partly my upbringing. I was born in Philadelphia. I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It was a typical American upbringing of watching Rocky movies and Phillies games and collecting baseball cards. And so there's a part of me recognizes a middle American experience, and yet I was a son of immigrants. And so I connect with Zoran Mamdani's biography of his parents leaving Uganda that was colonized by the British. And I just think it's probably just my life experiences that makes it possible to relate. And then it's my temperament. It's both an advantage and a disadvantage. I'm not a bomb thrower. I'm not someone who at typically is insulting folks on social media. It makes me go less viral. It makes me less known. But I try to be friendly. I try to see the best in people, sometimes to my detriment. But that's true to who I am.
Yeah. Two more Middle East questions, and then I want to talk about politics a bit. The president's got this deal in place, and there are a lot of variables here. There's been dangers to the agreement already on both sides, and they're trying to put in place this international force to keep the peace on the ground. There's still questions about rebuilding Gaza. If the president asks you, what are your greatest concerns now about implementing the peace plan?
Well, first of all, I would say, Mr. President, I actually gave you credit for that deal. I didn't, some people in my party think mentioning Trump is like Voldemort or something. You can't say the word. And I have not hesitated where there are times where I've agreed with the president. I've agreed with him on his prescription drug policies. I've agreed with him on his diagnosis of the Hollywood industry. And while I don't agree with all of him on all its policies in the Middle East, I do think that what he achieved in getting the release of the hostages and in getting Israel at the time to at least commit to stop bombing and withdraw deserved credit. And I was perfectly willing to say that. My concern will be that the ceasefire doesn't hold. I mean, as you know, that Netanyahu just 2 days ago struck Gaza, and Hamas still has not returned some of the dead, and that is a big deal in Jewish culture and for Israel. And Hamas has not disarmed. I do think they need to demilitarize, and I do think there needs to be alternative governance in Gaza. Now, I don't think that governance should be Donald Trump and Tony Blair. I think it should be Palestinians having a say in who their governance should be. But that my concern would be, how do we get the ceasefire to stick? And then not that Trump is going to listen to me, my sense to him would be, let's try to get Palestinians and the Arab countries determining the future of that governance, not you and Tony Blair.
One more question on this upset that people have at you over various things you've said about the Middle East, including saying associating with people who say Israel committed genocide in Gaza. A friend of mine's son serves in the military, and he asked me to ask you this: what would you say to that son who was born in the United States, now lives in Israel, serving the military, who feels hurt that you're basically accusing him of being involved in a genocide? What would you say to that American Israeli who's hurt by having someone who knows who you are and respects your place in the world? What would you say to that young man?
So first of all, I appreciate that he was called up to serve, and that he did that, and that there's a lot of importance to defending Israel's right to exist. The attacks from Iran, the attacks from Hezbollah, and of course the horrific October 7th attacks. What I would say is, I'm not a legal scholar, but I do believe the United States should defer on this issue to the United Nations and the International Court of Justice. That China is rallying a lot of the global South to their side, saying that they're more aligned with world opinion on this than we are. And I don't think the United States being isolated from the world is going to make us the moral leader of the 21st century. Now, I will defer to where the ICJ ends up on it, but that does not mean that we cannot still have a strong relationship within Israel that's committed to a two-state solution. It just means that we should recognize that life expectancy in Gaza went from 75 to 40, that too many civilians were killed, that there was destruction there, and that we should aim for a better world.
But all those things don't necessarily mean genocide, and genocide is a strong word. Why should we have an allied country that you believe committed genocide?
Well, the definition of genocide is not, as I understand it, from the, and I again defer to the ICJ and the UN, but it is not. It doesn't require just blatant intent to eliminate people. It also is, do the actions themselves lead to a significant destruction of a people? And here, where you have life expectancy going down, and where you have the destruction of property, there's a reason these international scholars, UN, and people even in Israel have said that. Now, do I compare it to what happened in Nazism? No, I've said that. And do I understand that there are people of goodwill who feel that word is emotionally charged? I do. Do I think it matters ultimately what we call it more than how do we stop the killing and how do we get to a two-state solution? I think the latter matters more. And I personally have always said since the beginning that I would defer to the UN and ICJ. And so when the UN report came out, there was surprise that I deferred to them. And I think that's where the intensity came. But I've been consistent about that since the beginning of the war.
Did you use the word out of a sense of intellect, morality, politics? Why did you use the word knowing how powerful that would be?
Well, I was hesitant to use the word for a long time because of the emotional connotation around it. But I always believed that the United States should be in compliance with international law and with human rights. And when the UN and ICJ came out with that finding, I thought it was an important finding. By the way, it's not just something that I believe. I was trying to, it's a word Theo Von had used well before I did, a year when I was on his podcast. I was talking to just briefly a Republican and his son, and the Republican, who was a supporter of mine, looks to me, and the son knows Barron Trump, and the son, big Vance fan, big Trump fan, and the father looks at me and he says, Ro, you've just gone too pro-Palestine. I like some of your economics, but I don't like what you're doing on calling for a Palestinian state and recognizing that without Hamas. And the son looks at me, Republican, Trump supporter, Vance supporter. He says, actually, that's the only thing I like about you, Ro, that you have this. So there is a generational divide on this. And people would be naive to think that divide is just on the Democratic side. There are a lot of people in the MAGA base who also have shifted their views on this issue.
Yeah, you're right about that. Your governor, in an interview with Bob Costa, CBS, said he would consider whether to run for president after the midterms. What did you think of that answer?
It was honest. I think he was. I mean, I don't think it comes for a surprise whether he runs or not. I mean, he's been wanting to run since at least 2023, and when it was unclear whether President Biden would run. So I think it was honest. What else can he say? And I think he's understandably focused, as we all are right now, on Proposition 50 and on making sure we win the midterms.
Would you say your deliberations are similar, that you'll think about it more seriously after the midterms?
Yeah, I would say that I absolutely want to be part of the national conversation, that I believe there's an economic pessimism around this country, that I represent a district today. NVIDIA went to $5 trillion. It's got $16 trillion of wealth. People are having mass layoffs, partly because of AI, and that I have a concrete roadmap for how people can achieve the American dream in the 21st century, of the way my family has, and what it's going to take to revitalize places like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, around the country. And I am going to be very aggressive about articulating what that should be. And then we'll see where things lead.
There's all the mechanical elements about fundraising and who else is running and whether it's right for your family. But historically, there's also this notion of, is it your time? Is it someone's time? Is this the year, the cycle to run for president? Barack Obama ran against all odds in 2008 because he was convinced that it was his time. Do you have a feeling like that you would match the moment, potentially at least, that you're the right, best person, not just to win the nomination, not just to win the general election, but to lead the country?
If the question is, how do we turn around economic pessimism in this country? How do we turn around a sense of division and anger and kind of a lack of confidence? You know, when my parents came to America, John F. Kennedy had said we were going to go to the moon. We were humming, we were moving. And if the question is who can bring back that kind of vitality and economic hope and try to bring this country together, I believe I have the best understanding of what is required for an economic renewal and what is required to achieve the American dream in the 21st century and how we can bring that confidence back. Is that going to be the question of the 28 election? That I don't know. I mean, maybe the question is, I hope it's not that we get into some war in Venezuela or that China takes Taiwan, or who knows what the question of that 28 election is. But if the question is people have lost faith in the American dream and who's going to be best able to renew it, I do think that I have a unique moment where I could lead.
You're not even 50, right? You're about to be 50 next year.
Yeah, you're reminding me.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you could run in 4 years, 4 years later, 8 years later, 12 years later, 16 years later. What would make this the moment for you? The notion that you're uniquely understand the American economy, is that what would, is that the thing that would make it your moment?
Through an AI revolution, a digital revolution, all the wealth keeps piling up in my district and places keep being hollowed out that Donald Trump talked about. And I agreed with his critique. I mean, you go to Western Pennsylvania, go to Warren, Ohio, go to Milwaukee, go to the South. I mean, textile left, steel left, industry left. I just don't think that tariffs alone build an economy. That's not how we're building wealth in a modern economy. And I believe that I have actually a vision of what it's going to take in an AI revolution to create high-paying jobs for Americans to become rich. I joked with someone, Mark, I said, it's an interesting thing that we see race first in this country because they see me as Indian American before they see me as Californian, and that may not be all that bad.
Yeah. Congressman Ro Khanna, California, who's finds himself magically at the center of every big debate, it seems. Congressman, thank you. Great to have you back on.
Thank you.
All right, that's Ro Khanna. Coming up next up here, Ricky Schlott, columnist and reporter for the New York Post, her colleague from the Post, Lydia Moynihan, and Alex Deitzwald, deputy editor of Maine's Mid-Coast Villager. We're going to talk Maine and New York City politics. That's next up. If you're 64 years of age or older, this is important. The Department of Justice recently sued 3 major Medicare brokers for claiming they were unbiased while allegedly pushing people into plans that got them the biggest kickbacks. It's true, so many insurance agents, they just can't be trusted, but you can't necessarily rely on government resources either. That's why I want to bring your attention to something called Chapter. Chapter was started by people who went through this exact thing personally after their own parents were pushed into the wrong Medicare plan by an agent who was more focused on commissions than on care. Chapter has a very simple mission to give every American the honest, straightforward Medicare advice that they need and that they deserve. And here's what makes Chapter different. They're the only Medicare advisor that compares every plan nationwide, not just a handful. That allows their clients to save an average of $1,100 a year. There's really no reason not to make the call. It's quick, it's easy, and they can review your options in under 20 minutes. If you're already in the correct plan for you, they'll let you know that. But if there's a better plan out there, they will help you make the switch. This could be the most important call you make this year. Dial pound 250 and say Chapter Medicare to get peace of mind. Again, pound 250 and say Chapter Medicare. All right, next up, we've got elections this coming Tuesday, including here in Gotham City, where the mayoral campaign has attracted much focus. And we're already thinking about the midterms, and there's an extraordinary thing going on in Maine with this guy who's named Graham Plattner, who's running for Senate there. So to talk about what's coming up next right away and then next up down the road, 3 great journalists, Ricky Schlott, columnist and reporter for the New York Post, her Post colleague Lydia Moynihan, and Alex Deitzwald of the deputy editor of something called the Mid-Coast Villager, which we will talk about. Welcome in, all of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here.
Great to be here. So, Alex, I want to start to have a little journalism talk, and our colleagues here will join in and be interested, I hope. You worked in national media, NBC News, MS, other national places, and you packed it all in like Green Acres to move the countryside to help start something called the Mid-Coast Villager. So explain what that organization is, what you cover, how it works.
Yeah, so I spent 15 years in DC, the last 10 of which were at NBC, MSNBC, covering national politics, presidential campaigns all over the country, Senate races. About 3 years ago, I kind of quietly moved up here to help take care of my mom, who's lived in Maine for about 20 years and was getting sick. And I was working remotely. Loved that job. They treated me wonderfully, but I wanted to do something different. I wanted to we all agree that there's a crisis in local news. We all agree that there are too many reporters in New York and DC and not enough in the rest of the country. And I met with the folks who were putting together this newspaper, the Mid-Coast Villager, which is actually a roll-up of 4 historic newspapers legacy goes back to the 1800s that covered this area. They had been failing for a long time, like so many other local newspapers. Pulled them all together, and the question was, do you shut them down or do you take a big swing and try to do something new? And Reed Brower, our owner, who's a local guy, decided to take a big swing. And this is the Midcoast Villager. I'm biased, but it's a phenomenal local paper. It's thick. We have 2 big sections every week. We have big supplements, like this one is on leading women in the communities. We're doing like really good, top-notch quality reporting. There's so many amazing stories to tell here in Maine. And we're not just a print paper, because of course you can't do that. We're doing all the online things also, but we also just opened a cafe, which is right downstairs from where I'm sitting right now, with the idea to have a physical embodiment of the paper and a community hub to build community. So my colleague right now is hosting a discussion about a story he did with the murder of this woman, Sunny Betts, who her murder got a lot of attention. She was a paddleboarder this summer. This was the guy who broke basically every piece of news that the world got about that story. And he's talking to folks about how that came together. Tomorrow morning, I'll be down there doing just basically office hours. Anybody can come in and chat with us, suggest stories, complain about something. And the idea is just to be accountable, transparent, present in the community. We live here. Our kids go to the schools here. When there's an ice storm and the power goes out, our power goes out. And we really hope that through that we can rebuild trust in news and build a viable, sustainable product that people really want to have in their lives.
And so to put the paper, as papers used to be, more at the center of how people think about their community, where there's reliable information and having a physical place people can gather, it's very innovative. Is a paper commercially successful?
We're getting there. All the trends are moving in the right direction, but no, we're not. We haven't broken even yet. I think I'm allowed to say that, and we still have quite a bit of work to do. We did, in bringing this new paper and bringing people like me on and a couple other colleagues, because this is a kind of place that attracts a freakish amount of national talent and really quality people. So costs have gone up. But subscriptions are up like 40%. Newsstand sales are up a huge amount. We just had a nice story in the New York Times. We're going to be featured on CBS Sunday Morning soon. And we just brought on a director of development to go after grants and philanthropic stuff. We are a for-profit company. We want to make a profit. We hope to get there soon. But with 2/3 or more of advertising spending going to Google and Facebook, that there's just not as much money out there. With subscriptions down, there's just not as much money out there. So we hope to supplement that with philanthropic funding for specific beats, specific issues that we want to cover.
Lydia covers business, and she's interested in the business of our business. So either your thoughts on this as a model for journalism to survive, or question for Alex.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious because there is so much hand-wringing about how we're losing local news. What support, if any, do you think you are getting maybe from national publications or advertisers, or should you be getting from those folks?
Well, I don't know about should, because we want to eat what we kill. We want to be, I nothing against a nonprofit organization. I think that's a great model, but I do worry that it gets you into a kind of vegetables mentality of like, we're doing stuff that is important, which is great, but we want to do stuff that people want to consume, that people want to pay money for, want to be associated with, and very community local based. So we don't go after any national advertisers, maybe one day. We do have, because Maine and Midcoast Maine is a kind of place that people like to vacation or retire in, we do have a pretty large following online from beyond our region. And so I could see national advertisers there. As far as publications, I think it's great that folks like the Times or CBS are lifting up these examples of innovative local news outlets. I was just at a conference in Salt Lake City put on by Press Forward, which is this big new umbrella organization that's helping a lot of innovative local news outlets. And it was so inspiring to meet these people across the country doing really interesting things, very few of which, by the way, look like a physical newspaper. This is like, there's social media first, people are doing direct mail, people are doing text messaging. It's just like, I think we've hit this nadir in local news where there's now a willingness to experiment and to try new things and not be stuck in the old ways. So I'm fairly optimistic about that, but we definitely have a long way to go as an industry to climb out of the hole that we're in.
Ricky, what do you think of this as a business model?
Yeah, one thing I'm curious about, I mean, I'm familiar with having some of my pieces end up in print, some of my pieces end up on web, some of them being in both. And I wonder, do you anticipate that there's a kind of different incentive that might arise with your print paper and the local stories that you might want to distribute to people immediately around you, and potentially a different direction that the internet and that broader audience might eventually kind of pull you towards? And is that potentially in the modern era like a conflict of interest for local papers?
It's a great question, and it's one that we think about a lot because we are a place, a region that attracts so much from away interest, as we were talking about, which is the main term for people who are not from Maine. It's a place that is very insular, proud of it, and I think it's actually kind of great. It's what keeps Maine special. So we do think about different audiences. Like our print audience is local, it's older, it's people who have subscribed to our predecessor papers for a long time, and as well as like newer, younger people who maybe were never interested in a newspaper, maybe never would have subscribed to a newspaper, but like what we're doing. Our web audience is broader. And even like if you look at Instagram and Facebook, it's completely different audiences. Like Instagram, it's more affluent. It's for us, it's more affluent. It's more female. It's younger. It's more national. Facebook is more local, more male, more conservative. It's like, so like on Facebook, crime stories perform really well. On Instagram, it's like a tour of a beautiful house that performs very well. So I do think like down the road, we could get to a place where we can better monetize that national audience because we want their dollars, right? Like we want your national dollars, please. But ultimately, we are serving the community, and that is the product that we care about most and that matters most. But if we can bring money from away to support local journalism here, that's huge. Another example that we just did, we just had our first writing retreat. The owner of our newspaper, who owns the cafe, also owns a little hotel that's right next door. So we brought in a national writer, a best-selling author, to run this writing retreat. It sold out in like a week. And there's lots of amazing authors here, but we intentionally wanted to bring somebody from away who would bring clientele from away. So we're not just squeezing our community, our advertisers, our businesses for more money to support this.
Alex, we're all cheering for Midcoast Villager to be a huge success. It's a great opportunity to prove that journalism can be a great business. So grateful to you. And you've lucked out because now you've gone from covering national politics to having one of the biggest national political stories in the country. First beat, Graham Plattner emerges from nowhere. Announces he's running for president, for Senate from Maine. And now he's facing a competition from the Jana Mills, governor of Maine. But the huge story, raises tons of money, gets endorsed by all these national figures. And it looks like what this could be kind of another Fetterman, a kind of Trump-like figure in touch with the working class. And then beat two. Someone dumps opposition research on the guy's head. All this stuff he wrote on Reddit, his tattoo, alleged Nazi tattoo. And that's beat two is it looks like, all right, the guy's dead. The guy's a flash in the pan. Beat three, you covered it, has a town hall with 700 people. 700 people in Maine is a big political crowd. So huge. Tell me what beat four is going to be.
Well, I don't know. I can tell you that it's not over. That's what I know for now, that the rumors of Graham Plattner's demise are greatly exaggerated. I'm not saying he's going to win, but I'm saying he's not going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, every day on my day to work, on my drive to work, I clock the yard signs and I make sure they're still up from the day before because there are a ton of Graham Plattner yard signs around here. They're still up. I went to this town hall on Monday to kind of do a damage assessment. As you said, 700 people, they were on their feet, they're cheering, they're applauding. I talked to a lot of them. They think it's kind of blown over. They're not too worried about this stuff. He's still raising money. He's still attracting a lot of attention. He just did an interview with this kind of speaking of the media business, a creator who goes by Black Girl in Maine. She's based in Portland. Maine is the whitest state in the country. And I know a lot of people who have been kind of waiting to see his interview with her and what she would do. And she comes out of it saying, I think the national media is not telling you the whole story here. I don't think he's a racist, anti-Semite guy. So it's been the biggest disconnect that I've had since being here of what I'm reading online and seeing on cable news and what I'm seeing with my own eyes and hearing with my own ears on the ground. This guy has a ton of juice. His campaign is not over. People relate to him. They feel like, yes, he made mistakes, but they've made mistakes. They're willing to move past it. And it speaks to the weakness of Janet Mills. I mean, if she was a stronger candidate, I don't think there would be as much appetite for an opponent.
It's a great establishment versus populist story. Lydia, if this guy were running in New York, can you imagine what the Post would be doing with all of this? What's your view of whether this guy he's a great story, obviously, but what's your view about whether he's going to make it and be the nominee?
I'm just so fascinated by this story that a week ago there was a K-File report in CNN that basically revealed he knew exactly what he was doing and he's been lying about it. That was based on Reddit posts that had him basically talking about sort of pro-Nazi rhetoric. And at the time, I mean, the thinking was, oh, surely Bernie Sanders will disavow him. Surely all of these national endorsements that he's gotten will fall by the wayside, because this is such a watershed moment for Democrats. All we've heard from them is Elon Musk is a Nazi, Trump is a Nazi. They've made these claims about the right, and then one of their own literally has a Nazi tattoo. And that was a conversation last week, and now it seems like nothing to see here, move along, it's fine. And clearly Democrats are fine with it. And I don't understand that. And I guess my question for Alex is, why do you think that the Democrats nationally haven't disavowed him? Why do you think they're just sitting by the sidelines, right? This should be a moment.
Great question.
Not say, no, we condemn Nazism. Why aren't they doing that?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them are, and it's a divide right now. It's really split, and I mean, you have some national people who are still defending him, like Bernie Sanders, Martin Heinrich, the senator from New Mexico, who was a early supporter and donated to him. But the New York Times column yesterday really taking him to task, a Guardian column. There's plenty of opposition there, but there's also plenty of support. And I think that's because he is speaking to something that the Democratic Party nationally is lacking so much and has gotten so bad at, which is talking to working people, coming across as real, authentic, relatable. I mean, here's a guy who, he didn't go to college. He didn't finish college. He started college, but didn't finish for combat tours. He's an oyster farmer. He looks the part. He sounds the part. He has an amazing message. I mean, I was blown away when I got a call to talk to him. I didn't really think much of a harbor master of a town of 1,200 running against Susan Collins. And then I got off the phone with him and was like, oh, this guy is going to be a thing. I don't know if he's going to be the nominee, but he's going to be a thing. So it's so sorely lacking. And I think you're seeing I think we're post-peak identity politics, post-peak woke. And so you're seeing a split among Democrats of people who still want to cling to those kind of, cancel politics and everything. And
whoa, Grant, it's not like he made a mean comment about someone or dressed up as Pocahontas 20 years ago. I mean, he literally has a Nazi tattoo.
Well, he has covered it over, but it's incredible. I agree with you. We're gonna keep covering. I want to switch the mayor's race though here in New York. Ricky, a bunch of polls out, early voting's underway. What's your sense now about where Mamdani and Cuomo, the only two, could win this race potentially? Where does the race stand overall?
I think there were some early, slightly cautiously optimistic indications for Cuomo relative to where he was standing for a while. There was one poll from Suffolk University that showed that he had closed the gap by half with Mamdani. So it went from 20% to now a lead of 10%, according to this one poll, where Mamdani was at 44% and Cuomo was at 34%. And Curtis Sliwa was at 11%, which makes you wonder what Sliwa was doing. If he dropped out, I think that Cuomo would be a lot closer to Mamdani. And that kind of caused the poly markets to dip finally for the first time in quite a while. Mamdani made it down into the 80s, but now he's headed back up into the 90s once again. There were a couple other good indications for the Cuomo team, which included the fact that older voters are showing up to vote early, which is a pretty big contrast from what we saw in the primary election, where it was predominantly younger voters, both in the early voting and the regular voting as well. So now we see that the largest demographic is the oldest age bracket of voters at the moment. And there is a good deal of 25 to 35-year-olds, but they're still being outnumbered by the older voters who tend to lean more towards Cuomo. But that said, I think things still do not look too great for him. And Mamdani is definitely still well in the lead, in my opinion.
Lydia, if we think about election night and Mamdani wins, which is the most likely outcome, do you think the city's going to be like convulsed with division, or do you think it's just people aren't going to pay attention? In other words, there's so many people we talked to on Two-Way and elsewhere who feel so passionately that he should not be mayor. Is this going to be a night of triumph or a night of division if he wins?
I think it's going to be a night of division. Look, I mean, he's more and more, even in the last few weeks, we found out about really problematic things that he said, that his father had said, talking about basically the IDF is somehow involved with the NYPD. And so I think, knowing what we know about him, I think it's going to be really shocking to think that this man can control or run as mayor, not just any city, but the largest, most important city, I believe, in America. So I think nationally, this is going to get eyes. I think nationally, it's going to be obviously a talking point for Republicans. Like, look how far the left has gone. Look how they've embraced socialism. Look how they've embraced essentially globalizing the Intifada. That's going to be the talking point from Republicans. I think actually here in the city, I think there will be a lot of shock, but I think very quickly that shock is going to turn to support for Elite Stefanik in the governor's race. And that's been something that obviously we're not talking about as much because that's next year and the mayoral election is next week. But if you look at the polling, it's really surprising to see, according to some polls, Elise Stefanik and Kathy Hochul are almost neck and neck. And so that's going to be the huge focus. And frankly, you know, the governor has the power of the purse. They have a lot more control than the mayor. And so that might be a chain reaction, which again, I think the governor is more impactful in that regard. So as far as
people,
interest,
if Mamdani wins, people are going to be talking about it. One last question for all of you about the media. I'm getting deja vu all over again, as the New York political theorist Yogi Berra would say, about the New York Times coverage of Mamdani. It's exactly like it was for Obama in 2008. The Post has been aggressive. You guys have been aggressive. Columnists and news side holding him to accountable, not just Oppo research, but writing about his past. Every day I wait for the New York Times to write one story scrutinizing the guy. And every day it's like, he's charming. He's got this cute, adorable coalition. It's so interesting. Really, what is going on in a newsroom where the New York Times literally does not hold the guy who's about to become mayor in all likelihood accountable? Lydia, you start. Like, what do you think's going on in a newsroom like that? Are they not talking about it?
At the same time, they're coming up with pieces about, oh, well, Cuomo 45 years ago lived in a rent-controlled apartment, continuing to attack Cuomo, which is like, wait, you're going after something that happened almost half a century ago, and you're not.
And Cuomo's
he said last year. What?
Cuomo's playing the part of like Hillary Clinton played in 2008. The Times would constantly write pieces about Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, never about Obama. I don't understand. Alex, you've been in newsrooms. Why would the New York Times not think part of their job would be to hold accountable the front runner?
Well, I think they should, obviously. Part of this is the record, though, that you're talking about. You know, I covered Hillary Clinton in 2016, and it's in this day and age when you have access to everything online, it's kind of a liability to have a long record in politics like that, because everything can get dredged up from your past. And so like a Mamdani or a Graham Plattner or somebody who comes in with a pretty fresh face and, you know, a thin resume for Graham Plattner, an incredibly thin resume. It's I don't know that it's good for democracy or the right way to work things, but it weirdly becomes a political asset. Yeah.
All right. We got to go, unfortunately. Alex, again, thank you. And we wish you the best of luck. And this Tuesday night, Ricky and Lydia and I will team up again, as we did for post-debate coverage, for coverage of election night on NewYorkPost.com and 2A.com, 2A.tv rather. Join us and our colleagues for full coverage this Tuesday night live of New York, Virginia, New Jersey, and everything else going on. So look forward to teaming up with you two again, and grateful to you for being here.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. That's it for today's program. We'll be back on Tuesday on Election Day with a brand new episode. Make sure you subscribe and download wherever you can get your podcast to Next Up, and be with us on YouTube and everywhere else the show is, so you always know what's coming next up.